Hi everyone, thanks for joining this session, Ireland is Unity on the Cards, as part of Canterbury's Revolution Festival. I'm Jonas, I'll be chairing the session today. Our speaker for this session is Chris Bambery. So he's a member of Conta's editorial board. He's an author of Ireland's Permanent Revolution and A People's History of Scotland, and he's currently writing a history of the Orange Order and sectarianism in Scotland. So you'll be speaking today on sort of recent developments in the fight for Irish unity and in the potential breakup of Britain. So thanks for coming on today, Chris. Without further ado, over to you.
My pleasure. I want to take you back to 1949 and a gentleman called Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Hall Thompson, who is a patrician member of the Unionist government of Northern Ireland responsible for education, and had just agreed to increase funding for schools run by the Catholic Church in the north of Ireland. Lieutenant Colonel Saunders Hall Thompson, much to his chagrin, I suspect, was summoned to a meeting of the Sandy Row Orange Order. Sandy Row is a very inner city, poor Protestant working class area in South Belfast, where he was told he had to explain his decision to increase funding for Catholic schools. They were not happy with this, and Lieutenant Colonel Hall Thompson had to subsequently resign because the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, Sir Basil Brooke, at another meeting of Orangemen, and by the way, the Orange Order is a sectarian, anti-Catholic, anti-Irish organisation, Basil Brooke attacked his colleague in government for increasing the funding to Catholic schools. And Lieutenant Colonel Hall Thompson felt himself obliged to resign. Now, I raise that because it is inconceivable in today's Northern Ireland, whatever the faults of Northern Ireland, that such a thing could happen. And essentially, a state which had been built on systematic discrimination and repression against a nationalist minority, a state created by carving 6 of the counties of Ulster and leaving out 9 to create what was seemingly a permanent unionist majority, a state where the Orange Order itself had decisive control over the Unionist Party. Every Prime Minister and the great majority of Unionist MPs in Northern Ireland were members of the Orange Order and took part on the 12th of July, the big procession on through Belfast to convey that. This is a sectarian state. And as I say, they had to, while the leadership of the Orange Order and the Unionist Party were industrialists and landowners and so on, they had to pay attention to the grassroots of that organization because they controlled a cross-class alliance, yes, led by the elite, but they had to pay attention to some of the concerns of their base in Northern Ireland society. So for instance, in 1945, they had felt obliged to go along with the Labour government in London and introduce the welfare state and the National Health Service, despite the fact they were allied with the Tories and were opposed to these measures. But they recognized they had to give those benefits to their own supporters inside that. That state, the unionist-run state, came to an end in 1972 when Britain got rid of Stormont and imposed direct rule from London. But I would argue the real change actually came much later. It came in 1998 when a Labour government under Tony Blair eventually took a decision that in Portadown, a Orange March would no longer be able to proceed through a Catholic area and return to a church and return through that area. This had caused 4 years of rioting. It had caused 4 years when the march had been forced through by the security forces. Eventually, under immense pressure, the Blair government decided this was never going to happen again. And the Guardian's correspondent, Hugo Young, main political correspondent, said, this marked a defining moment when the British government finally actually said it would not comply with discrimination in the north of Ireland. And I think in a sense he's right. They were actually saying this is something that's coming to an end now. The Good Friday process was already underway, the ceasefires were coming, and an agreement had to be made. I also want to take you back somewhere else to my early time. The first time I remember traveling from Belfast to Dublin, both by road and rail. You could tell when you crossed the border into the Irish Republic because the roads were bloody awful. The train services in the Republic were dreadful. They weren't brilliant in the north of Ireland, but the roads and trains were better. The poverty levels in Dublin were obviously worse than in Belfast. And the Catholic Church clearly had considerable sway in Irish society. When you were on a bus and it passed the Catholic Church, many of the people on the bus in Dublin would cross themselves every time they went past a Catholic church. That society no longer exists. Today, if you travel by road from Belfast to Dublin, you know you cross the border into the Republic because the roads are you hit a motorway. The roads are much better. It was the Dublin government that provided the money to make the Dublin-Belfast train service a fast service. You visit Dublin and actually living standards are clearly higher than they are in Belfast. There's poverty, I don't make it out like a paradise, but something has decisively changed in Ireland. The Republic is no longer what it was portrayed by unionist leaders as for many, many decades, when they said it was controlled by Rome, by the Catholic Church. Look at what's changed in the Republic in recent years. 2 referendums associated with mass campaigning overturned the ban and brought in same-sex marriage. The first time anywhere in the world this was brought in by a popular vote, by the way, and brought in abortion rights. Mass movements have been taking place over the fight against water charges, against the sexual abuse of children by Catholic priests, and we have seen a radical left emerge in the form of People Before Profit. And above all, we've seen Sinn Féin emerge as the largest party in the north of Ireland. And returning back to Northern Ireland, there is something else that changed last month. Northern Ireland was created to create a seemingly permanent unionist majority. But in the May elections, Sinn Féin emerged not as a majority, but as the biggest party in the north of Ireland. At this point, people like Basil Brooke and indeed Sir Edward Carson would be revolving in their grave about what had happened. And the Democratic Unionist Party, which had emerged as the largest unionist formation, no longer led by a patrician elite, by the way, led by a section of the petty bourgeoisie, associated with a rather strange church called the Free Presbyterian Church, created by a man called Ian Kyle Paisley, which has minute support in the north of Ireland, but dominates the DUP and means that it's implacably opposed to LGBT rights, abortion, and other things. Actually, again, today, Northern Ireland has worse abortion rights than the Republic. They were brought in by a British government, not by the Northern Ireland Assembly, because the DUP would not agree to it. And the whole question of LGBT rights is still up for grabs because of the bigotry of the DUP in terms of that. And at this stage, things have completely changed in the north of Ireland. And the question now is what would happen if, and these are 2 ifs. Firstly, if overcoming the obstacles created by the DUP and indeed the Boris Johnson government, Michelle O'Neill of Sinn Féin heads up the Northern Ireland, becomes First Minister of Northern Ireland and heads up a government in coalition with the DUP, but as the DUP is a junior partner. And in the Irish Republic, as the polls are going, Sinn Féin continues to be the largest party in the Republic and indeed enters a government. Now, these are 2 ifs, right? I'll try and come back to it. Under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, if both parliaments in Ireland agree to vote for a referendum on Irish unity, or a referendum on Irish unity will take place, it would be virtually impossible for the Johnson government, whoever's in government in London, to obstruct that, given the pressure they'd be under. And we're seeing this sort of pressure at the moment, actually, over the Northern Ireland Brexit protocol from Washington, from Brussels, etc. And here we have the other issue, which I've just mentioned, that the problem for problems emerging in Ireland is that the Brexit deal was achieved for Britain, but Northern Ireland voted to stay in the European Union. Now, while I personally voted to leave, I recognise the right of people in the north of Ireland, having voted to stay in the EU, to do so, as I do in Scotland. And it's quite important to stress this. Northern Ireland voted to leave, to stay in the European Union. The DUP voted for leave and didn't win. The way it's now put across is if somehow Northern Ireland did vote to leave, and the DUP represents the majority of people in Northern Ireland. It doesn't. And what happened was, under the reality of having one part of Ireland, the north, outside the EU, and the Republic inside the EU, would mean the imposition of a border because of the differences in trade. That broke the Good Friday Agreement. There must be no hard border in Ireland. Boris Johnson promised the DUP there would be no hard border. He then turned around and did a deal with the EU, which imposed a hard border in the Irish Sea between Britain and Northern Ireland. So this opens up another question about Irish unity. And it seems to me that the question here is that what would happen if we reached a situation where we were able to get a referendum? Now, I'm going to take it for granted that in the north of Ireland, the nationalist minority, now the majority actually, that's another thing that's changed, the majority of the population of north of Ireland, given the changes, would vote in favour of Irish unity, given the suffering they've had in the 6 county states since 1921. I'm going to look at 2 issues. The first is in the Irish Republic itself. So I wouldn't take it for granted whatsoever. It'd be automatic that people in the Irish Republic would vote for Irish unity. You'd have to remember there's 2 dominant parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, both in a Stop Sinn Féin getting into office coalition with the Green Party. The Greens have done some many bad deals around the world, but this must be the worst of them all, right? Joining the 2 main capitalist, openly capitalist parties in the Irish Republic. They would throw everything at stopping Irish unity, while maybe genuflecting towards it with some rhetoric. And what I mean by that was, firstly, they would dig out Sinn Féin equals the IRA, even after a quarter of a century of the IRA ceasing to exist, decommissioned, etc., and the fact that Mary Lou McDonald, Michelle O'Neill have got no history of involvement in the IRA, they would throw that one out. The other thing they would throw out is basically the dark north. Would you want these, and this would have some resonance, would you want these people coming into the Irish Republic? Look at these people wandering around with their orange sachets, playing their flutes, and by the way, the nationalists aren't much better either. Would you want this? Of course, the reality is that the Irish elite in the Republic do not want Irish unity because it would open up a series of questions I'm going to come on to. The Republic of Ireland is one of the most pro-capitalist countries in Western Europe. Much of the Celtic Tiger that existed was about American multinationals declaring profits in the Republic, even when they didn't make anything in the Republic, because the taxation system was so low, lower than any other state in Europe. And that was one of the key elements of it. And then for the people who run the Irish Republic, the Irish ruling class, they're very aware that issues will arise. I'll just give you a key example. In the Irish Republic, much has changed, but there is still a highly unequal 2-tier health service, one private and one semi-public, very unequal, in which the Catholic Church still have a control in particular hospitals and particular healthcare issues. The National Health Service does not exist in the Irish Republic. It exists, as I said, in the 6 counties. What's going to happen here? Well, the obvious answer, and to be fair, Sinn Féin actually have a policy, along with people not profit, for profit, etc., of saying they want a tax-funded healthcare system like the NHS in all of Ireland. That is the obvious only solution. But Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil aren't going to buy into that because it doesn't suit the economic interests of the Irish capitalist class. It would seem to me, and the other grouping would be the Irish Ulster Protestants in Northern Ireland. Here, I think we're talking about a group of people who have taken a severe psychological blow. The vast majority of them espouse a sort of nationalism, a national identity, which is British. They have never tried to develop a Northern Ireland nationalism. It's still a Britishness based on empire, and it's a Britishness which is completely strange to people in Britain today. In all honesty, if you were in Belfast on the 12th of July, the biggest orange parade, the Britain you see on the streets would be one you would reject. And the Protestant community in the north of Ireland is aware of this rejection. And it's aware they're regarded no longer as being valuable allies, but essentially as being true. And there are also changes within it. Take the Orange Order. The Orange Order is a declining body. A majority of its membership, living particularly in the border counties of Fermanagh, Tyrone, and Armagh, have reluctantly, very reluctantly, accepted things like bans on their parades. and have come to some sort of modus operandi in a society where they're no longer a majority. In the Belfast conurbation, in really run-down states, where there is now an equality of poverty between Protestant and Catholic, the statistics are virtually the same. If anything, actually, the Catholic middle classes have done much better for themselves, in large part because much of the Protestant middle class has fled. Their kids go to university in Britain and don't come back. Much of that of what Belfast was, where the shipbuilding was, not dissimilar to other cities in Britain, but where the shipbuilding and heavy engineering was, deindustrialized areas, beginning to become depopulated because there's flight out of Belfast in particular into down into Antrim, in a city which is now majority Catholic. Right? There are now pockets of people who no longer identify with the Orange Lodge. These are the people you saw rioting about the Brexit process. They essentially have a culture, if you want to call it that, which identifies with loyalism and the loyalist paramilitaries, who incidentally are still in place, who haven't gone away. The IRA have gone away, apart from those small groups who reject the ceasefire. The loyalists are still there. Those are people, but they're a minority now. And the majority of Protestants are very unsure about what's going to happen. In the May elections, the Alliance Party, which claims to be neutral, received a lot of unionist votes. And I think it's not insignificant. It's not because I have illusions in the Alliance Party, because it's the beginning of potentially a shift from unionism to something else, towards people beginning to reject that. And I think you're also seeing, I mean, in certain of the business circles, people saying that politically I vote for the union. I've heard this actually from business people, but economically, I see the case for United Ireland. I see what the possibilities are. We don't want this, boundary. So I don't want to spend a lot of time over this, but I think the potential, and they're big ifs. I mean, the first stumbling block is that there has to be a Sinn Féin-led government in the Northern Ireland, with Michel O'Neill becoming First Minister. Secondly, there has to be, and hopefully there will be, a Sinn Féin entering government. That itself begs questions. Who with? With People Before Profit? That's a runner. With Fianna Fáil? No. And that's a question that Sinn Féin are going to have to face, and the outcome of that is not guaranteed. But what I will say, returning to this, is let's just say we get to a situation there is an all-Ireland referendum in unity. Mary Lou McDonald has said that they would want 5 years to achieve this. And I actually think that's quite realistic, because I think you need 5 years to win in the Republic. I think it's going to be an argument. As I say, it's not automatic. But the more important thing is, if you want to win in the Republic of referendum Irish unity, and you want to pull a section of Protestant working class people, it is going to have to require a radical agenda. It is going to require the promise that the National Health Service will be extended to the 26 counties of Ireland, Southern Ireland. It's going to require a promise that the abortion rights in the Republic will be extended into the 6 counties. If you like, the best of both societies have got to be brought together. And I think it's possible to win that. And the reason is because of some of the changes I've tried to talk about. Back in 2019, the remaining 125 workers at Belfast, Harland and Wolff shipyard occupied over closure. This was the central workplace in the north of Ireland at the time of partition. It's been run right down into the ground. What was important about it was that they were prepared to accept support and solidarity from working class people across Ireland, from Dublin, Waterford, Cork, etc. They were prepared to accept elected representatives of Sinn Féin and People Before Profit coming to their occupation and giving support. This would have been unfeasible half a century ago. It shows what possibilities there could be if you have that radical agenda for what United Ireland would be, of winning over support. In the South, you've got to tap into the sorts of mass movements I've talked about. The people who campaigned for same-sex marriage, for abortion rights, the people who take to the streets to stop water charges. They have to be the driving force of the fight for an Irish unity. And if you like, I'm going to end by saying this: we have to return to the politics of the greatest Irish socialist, James Connolly, who famously said it is not enough to take down the Union Jack from Dublin Castle and haul up a green flag. We are out for social and political emancipation as well as national freedom. And our vision of what a united Ireland must be the Connolly one. It must be one of, yes, we want to have national freedom, in this case, Irish unity, but we also want social and political emancipation. We want something better than what exists in Northern Ireland and something better than what exists in the Irish Republic. And unless we can offer something better to the people of both cases, there is no guarantee we're going to vote for a vote for a united Ireland. I've probably spoken enough, but I think just to emphasize what the changes are in the north of Ireland. Today, unemployment among Catholic and Protestants is equal. Earnings in Northern Ireland have always been lower than the United Kingdom, and they are still lower by 10%. But the biggest difference is in terms of the middle classes. And the dominance, well, I wouldn't say dominance, but the fact that the majority of professionals and managerial class are now Catholics. And this sense, which is haunting the Protestant population, of who they are. And if you listen as I do, I mean, you know, they will come on and start bemoaning the fact that the other side seem to have all the poets. The other side seem to have all the novelists. The other side have a culture which is accepted worldwide. The other side have articulate politicians, unlike ours. And this sense they have of, you know, they are very aware, to repeat a point, that their version of Britishness is one rejected by people in Britain. And where are they to go? Well, of course, one answer would be to return to violence, but that's not acceptable in Northern Ireland now. The majority of people do not want a return to violence. I'm not saying that loyalists will not re-emerge and do bad things, but as a sustained campaign, I don't see that happening because there's not popular support for that return in terms of that. And the loyalists themselves are a minority. I mean loyalists as opposed to people who support the union with Britain, people who are support the UDA, UVF, etc. So I think there is a possibility, a real possibility of a united Ireland here, but it requires that radical agenda if and when we get a referendum. So leave it there and take your questions.
Thanks very much, Chris, for that fascinating introduction. I'm seeing lots of virtual applause, which was very good.